Oh my, would you look at the time. It's historical misconception hour. That's right, kids. Today I'm going to debunk a commonly held rumour that sword ownership in the Middle Ages was a mark of wealth and social standing. I'm here to show you that, although a reasonable thing to believe, it is actually not all that true. First of all, the misconception. Historians argue about when exactly the Middle Ages started, but the general idea is that it followed the fall of the Western Roman Empire. It is believed that a sword was a mark of great wealth in the Middle Ages, owned by noblemen, or other more well-off and influential people. Those are the ones who would be well-trained and form the fighting elite of the standing armies. Considering I argue from, and I base my argument around the evidence of, the English standpoint, you may ask who the rank-and-file soldiers were. Those were the archers, those who wielded the longbows, who wore little to no armour and were trained more so in missile warfare. Taking into consideration the price of metal, the nature of ranged warfare, and the manpower required to forge a sword, it is believed that these soldiers had little use for swords. First of all, let us compare the nature of sword fighting to the nature of hammer fighting. A sword is slashing, chopping, stabbing. A mace is stomping, crumping, clobbering. What use would an armoured nobleman have for a sword that cannot penetrate the armour of the front line, similarly armoured nobleman or knight? Now give that man a hammer, and watch him smash his way through their lines, up close and personal, just where he wants to be. On the flip side, when the rank-and-file archers, normally light armoured, close the gap, why use a cumbersome war mace when a sword will do the job a lot faster? Now that sounds like speculation, you might add, and doesn't remove the problem of swords still being expensive. That is exactly my point though. Swords then were like cars now. A brand new Porsche would cost a lot, and would belong to a wealthy individual. But my friends, not every car is a Porsche. So an archer, who during the Middle Ages made a shilling a day in his wages, obviously could not afford a sword Porsche. How could he get a sword? He could get one from his father. He could buy a second-hand one which went in the bargain bin for a third of his daily wages. He could loot one from the dead. He could buy a reject sword. Even use a broken sword as a makeshift dagger, a sword which has been recently reforged. There's a multitude of combinations. Henry V had 12 swords made, each at the cost of £5,000, enough to buy a small castle at that point. But people read that, and they assume that all swords are sword Porsches, when in fact an archer, or even a local militiaman, could buy a 3-door old banger of a car, sword, get it sharpened, and stab a Frenchman in his stupid face all the same. To conclude, I hope I've cleared at least part of this up for you. The greatest primary source I call upon here generally tend to fall from the obituaries of soldiers, detailing how they bought their second-hand swords. Warfare would move on in time. The Middle Ages would give way to the Renaissance and the Military Revolution. It would give way to the pikeman, who would become the musketman, who would become the rifleman, who would become the infantryman. This has been my opinion of why this historical misconception exists, and I hope to see you all again soon.